Clara Barton clutched the crumpled letter in her trembling hands, the coarse paper soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times. The train jostled along the uneven tracks, its wheels groaning against the iron rails, and Clara's heart seemed to beat in rhythm with the clamor. Dust streaked the windows, and the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the worn leather seats. Clara's reflection in the glass looked distorted, stretched and blurred, and for a moment she wished it wasn't just the window making her look that way. The letter bore the promise of a new beginning. Jeb Carter, a rancher from the frontier town of Dustwater, had written with a practical, straightforward tone. He needed a wife. She needed a place to belong. The words were spare, but there was kindness between the lines, or at least that's how Clara had read it. Hope had been the ink that filled in the gaps, shaping dreams around his plain sentences. She imagined a sturdy man, dependable, maybe a bit stoic but good-hearted, waiting to share a life with her. After all, wasn't that what she deserved after a lifetime of being told otherwise? The train whistle screamed, signaling the approach to Dustwater, and Clara's stomach twisted in knots. She adjusted her worn but carefully mended dress, smoothed her thick auburn hair, and tucked the letter back into her satchel. As the train slowed to a halt, she peered out, squinting through the dust rising from the station platform. Men in wide-brimmed hats and dusty boots gathered, some unloading crates from the freight cars, others watching the new arrivals with idle curiosity. Clara stepped down, her shoes hitting the sun-baked ground with a muted thud. The air was dry, gritty, and she inhaled cautiously, trying not to cough. Dustwater was rougher than she'd imagined, a collection of weather-beaten buildings with faded signs and splintered porches. The scent of leather, tobacco, and sweat lingered, mingling with the sweet, fleeting scent of wild sage. A chill pricked her spine despite the heat. Her eyes scanned the crowd, seeking out Jeb. A tall, lean figure broke away from a cluster of men near the saloon, his long strides purposeful. He wore a tattered brown coat, the brim of his hat shading his face, but Clara could see his mouth, a hard, thin line. When he finally stopped in front of her, he tipped his hat back, revealing eyes like flint, cold and assessing. "You're Clara?" he asked, his tone flat, neither welcoming nor kind. She forced a smile. "Yes, Mr. Carter. I'm pleased to meet you." His gaze swept over her, lingering on the fullness of her figure, the soft curves accentuated by the snug bodice of her dress. A sneer twisted his mouth and he scoffed, loud enough for the nearby men to hear. "This ain't what I ordered," he muttered, shaking his head. The men snickered, their amusement cruel and sharp. Clara's cheeks burned. "Excuse me?" she managed to say, barely above a whisper. "You said in your letters you were a hard worker," Jeb spat. "Didn't say you were built for plowing more than housekeeping." Laughter erupted from the onlookers and Clara's vision blurred. Jeb didn't lower his voice, didn't spare her even a shred of dignity. She wanted to shrink, to vanish, but she couldn't move, rooted to the spot by his disdain. The words cut deeper than any knife. "I didn't come here to be insulted," Clara whispered, her throat tight. Jeb shrugged, indifferent. "You're not what I wanted. Go back to wherever you came from. You ain't gonna make it out here." The words hung in the air like the dust swirling around them. Clara swallowed hard, biting down the sob clawing its way up her throat. She couldn't let him see her break. Gathering the remnants of her pride, she turned, pushing past the group of leering men. Her hands trembled as she clutched her satchel, forcing one foot in front of the other until she reached the edge of the platform. Behind her, Jeb's voice still carried, mocking and cruel. "Thought I'd get a wife, not a damn draft horse. Guess some folks don't know what decent looks like." Clara didn't turn back. Tears stung her eyes, but she pressed on, her footsteps heavy as she made her way to the only place that looked remotely welcoming, a small boarding house on the far side of town. Inside, the scent of baking bread and wood polish greeted her, and a stout woman with kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Need a room, dear?" the woman asked, her voice soft. Clara nodded, unable to form words. The woman, Martha, the sign on the counter read, gestured for her to sit, pouring her a cup of water from a chipped pitcher. "You look like you've been through the ringer," Martha observed. "Men out there can be rough. Don't let them get to you." Clara managed a shaky smile, clutching the cup to steady her hands. Martha didn't pry, just handed her a key with a gentle pat on the shoulder. The room upstairs was small, the bed narrow but clean. Clara sank onto it, the springs creaking under her weight. As the door clicked shut, the tears finally broke free, hot and silent, tracing paths down her cheeks. She pressed the pillow to her face to muffle the sobs, her heart aching with the bitter sting of rejection. Night fell slowly, the room growing colder as the wind howled through the gaps in the windowsill. Clara lay motionless, the humiliation replaying over and over in her mind. 1,000 miles from home, no one to turn to, her dream crumbled before it even had a chance to take root. Eventually, her tears dried, and anger kindled where sorrow had been. Jeb's sneer, the laughter, the way he had dismissed her so casually, it all burned in her chest. Clara sat up, wiping her face, the resolve hardening in her bones. She wasn't about to run back home with her tail between her legs. Dustwater might not be what she expected, but she wasn't about to let one cruel man decide her fate. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, a chance to prove to herself that she wasn't as weak as they thought. Clara clenched her hands into fists, feeling the calluses from years of hard work. She knew how to fight for herself. Jeb Carter hadn't seen the last of Clara Barton, and neither had Dustwater. As sleep finally took her, Clara dreamed not of rejection but of forging her own path, stubborn as the sagebrush that clung to life in the relentless desert. The first light of dawn seeped through the thin curtains, painting Clara's room in shades of gold and gray. Sleep had come in fitful fragments, but she rose with the stubbornness of the desert itself. Clara splashed cold water on her face from the porcelain basin, the chill snapping her thoughts into sharp focus. If Dustwater had rejected her, then she would find a way to make Dustwater need her. Jeb Carter's cruelty was his own ugliness, not hers. The man was nothing but bone and bile, a dry weed cracked by his own bitterness. Clara brushed her hair back, securing it with pins, her fingers steady and sure. She was more than the sum of his insults. Downstairs, Martha was sweeping the wooden floors with brisk efficiency, her rounded shoulders hunched with the effort. When Clara appeared, Martha looked up, her sharp eyes softened by concern. "Sleep all right?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "Well enough," Clara replied, offering a faint smile. She hesitated before continuing. "I was wondering if you knew of anyone hiring. I need work. Something I can do to earn my keep." Martha leaned her broom against the wall, studying Clara with an assessing gaze. "What sort of work have you done before?" "I've cooked, cleaned, mended clothes," Clara said. "Anything you need done, I can do it." Martha's lips twitched in amusement. "Just so happens I've been looking for someone to help around here. Room and board in exchange for chores, maybe a little pay if you prove yourself useful. You willing?" "I'm willing." Clara's answer came quick and certain. She couldn't afford to hesitate. "Good. Let's see if you can handle yourself then." Martha's tests were not simple kindness. Clara scrubbed floors until her knees ached, hauled water from the well, and boiled sheets until the steam made her skin bloom pink. She worked until her hands throbbed, her muscles burning from effort. It was honest labor, and though her body protested, Clara found herself welcoming the pain. Every task completed was proof that she could endure. The boarding house catered mostly to miners, ranch hands, and the occasional traveler passing through Dustwater on their way to something better. They were rough men, worn by toil and sun, but Martha kept them in line with a scowl sharp enough to cut glass. Clara's first night serving dinner was a storm of clattering dishes and shouted orders. She moved through the cramped dining room, dodging elbows and spilled ale, her eyes wide and wary. The men's gazes tracked her with curiosity, suspicion, and sometimes an unwelcome hunger that made her skin crawl. "You'll get used to it," Martha said, clapping her on the shoulder as Clara stumbled through the kitchen door, her arms full of empty plates. "They bark worse than they bite." "Mostly." Clara tried to laugh, but the sound came out strained. Still, she returned to the dining room, her back straight and her chin high. She would not cower. Days turned into weeks, and Clara found a rhythm in the work. Her hands toughened, her body growing stronger with each passing day. She learned to handle the miners' crude jokes with a tight smile or a quick retort. The ranch hands respected her grit, and some even nodded politely when she refilled their mugs. Martha kept her busy, never allowing her too much time to brood. When Clara wasn't serving food or scrubbing dishes, she was mending torn shirts, polishing boots, or sweeping out the rooms. There was always something to be done, and for that, Clara was grateful. One evening, after the last of the dinner rush had died down, Clara sat at a corner table with a steaming cup of tea clutched between her palms. Her body ached from the day's work, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the exhaustion. Martha slid into the seat across from her, folding her arms over the table. "You've lasted longer than most," she said. "Hard work don't scare you none, does it?" Clara shook her head. "I was raised to work hard. Never could do enough to please my family, but at least here, I know when a task's finished. And it's mine to complete." Martha nodded, her expression approving. I've seen you handle yourself well enough. And you've been good with the customers. Not every woman can hold her ground with the likes of them. They're just men, Clara replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her own voice. No worse than the ones back home, just rougher around the edges. Martha chuckled. That's one way of putting it. Truth is, most of them are decent enough if you don't take their bluster to heart. The West draws all kinds. Some make themselves good men out here, others let the wildness get to them. Clara thought of Jeb, of his sneering face and the hateful laughter that had followed his rejection. A man like that was already lost to the wildness. But not her. She would prove that she could carve out her own place, with or without anyone's approval. I need to find something of my own here, Clara admitted, her voice low. Not just scrubbing floors or serving drinks. Something that's mine. Martha's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. I've seen the way you patch those shirts, how careful your stitches are. You've got skill with a needle. That's something if you know how to use it. Clara frowned. You think people here would pay for that? They pay for good work, Martha said firmly. If you're willing to charge for it. The idea took root, fragile but determined. Clara's fingers flexed against the rough wood of the table, imagining the feel of fabric beneath them. It wasn't much, but it was a start. You've been good to me, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. I won't forget it. Don't go getting sentimental, Martha replied with a gruffness that was almost affectionate. You earned your place here. Now it's up to you to keep it. The words settled like stones in Clara's chest, solid and comforting. Her rejection had not been the end of her story. It had only been the beginning. She'd endured the humiliation and pushed through the hurt. Now she was determined to build something of her own. The next morning, Clara set up a small table near the front of the boarding house, her needles and thread laid out with quiet pride. She stitched for the ranchers, repairing shirts torn by barbed wire and trousers ripped by jagged rocks. Her hands moved with careful precision, the repetitive motions soothing and familiar. Word spread quickly. Clara's work was good, her stitches fine and durable. Men who once laughed at her now paid for her skill, their coins clinking against the tabletop as proof of her worth. For the first time since her arrival, Clara felt something close to hope. It was small, a glimmer in the dark, but she clung to it fiercely. Dustwater hadn't beaten her. It hadn't even broken her. And the fire burning within her only grew brighter with each passing day. But behind the satisfaction of her newfound place, there lingered the shadow of Jeb Carter's words. His sneer haunted her dreams, the reminder of rejection simmering just beneath her skin. Clara knew better than to trust peace to last. Dustwater was a cruel place and not all wounds healed so easily. She had found resilience. Now she needed to find strength. The clang of the bell above the door announced the arrival of another customer. Clara glanced up from her stitching, her fingers pausing only briefly before resuming their delicate work. The mornings were usually slow, and she cherished the quiet moments when the needle's rhythm soothed her thoughts. A man stepped into the boarding house, his shoulders dusted with the dry ochre grit of the plains. He wore a weathered hat, its brim shading eyes that looked out at the world with a calm that Clara envied. His build was sturdy, muscles honed by labor rather than cruelty. He moved with a kind of unassuming grace, like a river carving its way through stone. Martha raised an eyebrow from behind the counter. Morning, Sam. Come for your usual coffee or something stronger? Just coffee today, he replied, his voice warm and unhurried. Got cattle to check on before sundown. He tipped his hat to Clara as he took a seat near her table. She returned the gesture with a polite nod, her fingers not pausing their work. His eyes flicked to the small, neatly arranged pile of mended clothes beside her. Didn't realize Martha had brought on a seamstress, he said, his voice carrying just enough interest to make her look up. I suppose you could call me that, Clara replied. I repair things mostly. Shirts, trousers, sometimes boots if they're not too far gone. Well, it looks like you're doing good work. His gaze was steady, absent of the leer or scorn she'd grown accustomed to. Clara offered a faint smile. It's something I know how to do. Figured I might as well use it. Might as well indeed. Sam's smile was easy, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm Sam Callahan. Got a small spread a few miles out. Come to town when I need supplies or to remind myself I haven't gone completely feral. The joke was unexpected, but it pulled a genuine laugh from Clara. I'm Clara. Clara Barton. And I suppose I'm about as far from feral as you can get. Doesn't seem like you're too soft either. Not if you're making your own way out here. His words held no trace of pity, only respect. Martha arrived with his coffee, setting the steaming cup in front of him with her usual brusque efficiency. "You'll have to forgive Sam. He's one of the few around here who still remembers his manners." "I'll take that as a compliment," Sam replied, chuckling before taking a sip. Clara continued her sewing, but she couldn't help glancing up at him every so often. There was something about his presence, solid, genuine, that made the room feel warmer. Over the next several weeks, Sam returned to the boarding house more frequently, his visits no longer tied to meals or errands. Sometimes he brought shirts or trousers to be mended, though Clara suspected he'd torn them on purpose just to have an excuse to see her. The thought both charmed and unsettled her. She had been dismissed and ridiculed so often that kindness felt like something sharp, waiting to cut her when she wasn't looking. One afternoon, Sam caught her just as she was packing up her needles and thread. A storm had swept through earlier, the rain leaving the air crisp and cool. Clara relished the relief from the relentless heat, her skin tingling with the freshness of it. "I was hoping you'd have some time for a walk," Sam said, his tone almost sheepish. "Reckon you've been cooped up in here too much." Clara hesitated, her fingers clutching her work bag. No one had asked her for anything that wasn't labor or service. The invitation felt foreign. Suspicious. "I suppose a walk wouldn't do any harm," she said at last, her voice measured. "As long as you don't mind going slow. These boots weren't made for trudging through mud." "Wouldn't dream of making you struggle," Sam replied with a grin. "And I reckon I could use a slower pace myself." They wandered along the edge of town, the buildings giving way to stretches of rugged, untamed land. The grass swayed in the breeze, silvered by the late afternoon sun. Sam talked easily, his words rolling out like the slow churn of a river. He spoke of his ranch, the challenges of keeping cattle alive through drought and storm, and the loneliness that sometimes settled over him like a thick fog. Clara found herself sharing pieces of her own story, her words tentative at first, then gathering momentum. She spoke of her family's harshness, their constant reminders of her shortcomings. She told him about Jeb's rejection, her voice tight with the effort of keeping her emotions in check. "He's a fool," Sam said bluntly. "If he can't see past his own spite to recognize your worth, he's not worth knowing." Clara glanced at him, startled by the fervor in his voice. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "Enough to see you've got more grit and kindness in you than most folks around here. And more determination than any man I've met." The words burrowed into her chest, filling the hollow places Jeb had left behind. But with the warmth came fear. Clara's defenses rose, her gaze hardening as she looked away. "Kind words are easy enough to say," she murmured. "I've heard them before." "Maybe so," Sam admitted. "But that doesn't mean they're not true." They walked in silence for a time, the air between them thick with unspoken things. Clara didn't know what to make of him. His kindness unsettled her, but it also drew her like a fire in the darkness. The pull was undeniable and terrifying. The days passed and Sam continued to visit. He brought her small gifts, a polished stone from the creek, a wildflower he'd found blooming stubbornly among the weeds. Clara accepted them with a caution that slowly softened into something like trust. Their conversations grew longer, their silences more comfortable. One evening, Sam offered to teach her to ride. Clara eyed the horse with suspicion, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. "I've never been on one," she admitted. "Well, it's high time you learned," Sam said with a grin. "Don't worry. I'll keep you from falling." He lifted her onto the horse with surprising gentleness, his hands steadying her even as her nerves frayed. She clung to the saddle, her knuckles white, but Sam's calm voice guided her through the motions. When she finally dared to look away from the ground, she found him smiling up at her, his expression free of mockery. "You're doing fine," he said. "Better than most your first time." Clara laughed, the sound bursting from her before she could stop it. She had expected ridicule, but Sam only offered patience. His kindness was as constant as the sun's rise and just as necessary. When the lesson ended, Clara's legs wobbled but her smile lingered. As Sam helped her down, his hand remained clasped around hers longer than necessary. For once she didn't mind. Their eyes met and Clara felt something inside her shift, a wall crumbling brick by brick. Sam's smile widened, his thumb brushing her knuckles before he released her hand. Neither spoke of love. But the seed had been planted, and both of them felt it beginning to grow. The wind howled through Dustwater, rattling the wooden signs that hung over porches like old bones. Clara's sewing business had grown slowly but steadily. Miners brought her torn trousers, ranchers brought ripped shirts, and even Martha occasionally requested a mending of curtains or bed linens. Clara had earned her place, had carved out a small but real corner of life where she was respected for her work. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, a shadow circling her like a hungry wolf. Sam's visits had become part of her days, his presence a comfort she had come to rely on. They walked together through the town's outskirts, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. He spoke of his ranch with pride, his dreams of expanding, of building something lasting. Clara listened, her own dreams whispering beneath his words. But she was always cautious, guarding herself against the hope that had betrayed her before. Trusting another man felt like walking across a bridge made of splintered wood. Yet Sam's kindness remained unyielding, his care unwavering. It frightened her as much as it healed her. One evening, as the sun bled crimson over the horizon, Clara sat stitching by the window, her hands moving with steady precision. The quiet was broken by the sudden bang of the door as it flew open, slamming against the wall with a violence that made her flinch. Jeb Carter stood there, his eyes bloodshot, his breath stinking of whiskey even from across the room. His sneer was familiar, but there was a desperation beneath the cruelty now, something jagged and restless. "Well, ain't this a pretty little picture?" he slurred, staggering forward. "Miss Barton, all set up like a queen in her castle. Shoulda known you'd be too stubborn to leave." Clara rose, her spine stiffening. "You've made your thoughts plain, Jeb. Leave me be." "Leave you be?" He laughed, the sound twisted and joyless. "You've been making a fool of me, woman. Strutting around like you're better than the rest of us. Like you're better than me." "I've done nothing but work hard and mind my own business," Clara replied, her voice low and controlled. "If that offends you, then that's your own failing." "Your own business?" Jeb spat on the floor, his eyes wild. "You humiliated me, made everyone talk like I was the fool for turning you away. And then you go on playing house with that rancher like you're something special." The mention of Sam sent a chill through Clara's veins. Jeb's jealousy was like a sickness, festering and growing uglier with each passing day. "Whatever happens between Sam and me is none of your concern," Clara said, her fingers clenching around the edge of the table. "Now get out." Jeb's expression twisted into something darker. "Maybe you need reminding of your place." Before Clara could react, he lunged toward her, his hand latching onto her arm with a bruising grip. She gasped, her skin prickling with terror. But beneath the fear, a fierce anger surged, boiling through her blood. "Let go of me," she shouted, wrenching her arm free. Her voice shook the room, echoing through the halls. Martha burst into the parlor, her eyes blazing. "Get out, Jeb Carter," she snapped, her voice sharper than any blade. "You've caused enough trouble for one lifetime." Jeb sneered but backed away, his fists clenching and unclenching like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. "This ain't over," he snarled, his gaze flicking to Clara. "You think you can just go on pretending you're better than me? We'll see about that." He stumbled out, slamming the door behind him so hard the glass rattled. Clara stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Martha moved to her side, her face tight with worry. "You all right, dear?" Martha asked, her voice gentler than Clara had ever heard it. "I will be," Clara replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm tired of being afraid." Martha nodded, her expression approving. "Then don't be. You've made yourself something good here. Don't let that fool tear it down." The words settled deep within Clara, anchoring her resolve. Whatever Jeb intended, she would not let him ruin what she had built. The following days were tense, each sound from the street causing Clara's heart to quicken. Sam noticed her anxiety and pressed her for an explanation. Reluctantly, she told him about Jeb's threats, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Damn him," Sam growled, his fists clenched. "He's a coward. Picking at you just because he's too small a man to face his own failings." "He wants to hurt me," Clara admitted, her eyes meeting Sam's. "And you too if he thinks you're the cause of it." "Then let him try," Sam replied, his voice firm. "I won't let him touch you. I swear it." The promise filled Clara with warmth and fear in equal measure. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the solidity of his words. But trust had always come at a price. It was the night of the harvest dance when Jeb finally made good on his threats. The whole town had gathered in the square, laughter and music filling the air. Clara wore a dress Sam had given her, its rich blue fabric a stark contrast against the dust and grit of Dustwater. She felt beautiful, cherished even, Sam's arm secure around her waist. But then Jeb appeared, staggering from the shadows like a feral beast. His eyes were wild, his voice a twisted snarl. "You think you can just ignore me? Make me a joke in my own town?" "Leave her be, Jeb," Sam said, stepping between them, his stance unyielding. I won't be shamed by the likes of her, Jeb shouted, his hand twitching toward the revolver at his hip. The gunshot echoed like thunder. But it was not Sam who had fired. Clara stood with Martha's old pistol clenched in her shaking hands. Her aim had been true, her shot grazing Jeb's arm and sending him sprawling to the ground, his weapon clattering uselessly against the dirt. Blood seeped from the wound, but the injury was minor. His pride had taken the worst blow. Get out of Dustwater, Jeb, Clara said, her voice steady now. And if I ever see you again, I won't be so merciful. The crowd murmured, their shock mingling with approval. Sam took the gun from her trembling hands, his touch gentle. Jeb crawled away, his curses swallowed by the dark. Dustwater was finished with him, and so was she. Sam pulled Clara into his arms, holding her as if she might slip away. But Clara was stronger than she had ever been. The fire inside her burned bright and clear. You were incredible, Sam whispered, his voice thick with admiration. I'm tired of being afraid, Clara replied, her eyes meeting his. And I'm tired of running. Then stay, Sam said, his voice rough but tender. Stay with me. Clara nodded, the fear finally releasing its hold on her. Dustwater had tried to break her, but she had risen from its ashes stronger than before. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with him. And for the first time, the future didn't seem like something to dread, but something to welcome.